Before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank everyone who's been supporting this channel. Your views, comments, and messages make it possible to keep telling these stories. In this episode, you'll hear 4 unsettling accounts of UFO and alien encounters, drawn from real reports shared by the people who lived through them. Each story stands on its own, but together they paint a disturbing picture of encounters that don't fit easy explanations. Welcome to Strange Encounters. Before we begin, a brief disclaimer. The story you're about to hear is based entirely on the personal testimony of one individual. There are no official records, physical evidence, or independent corroboration confirming that these events occurred as described. What follows is presented for historical and cultural context, not as proven fact. In the early years of the modern UFO era, long before the term alien abduction entered the public imagination, there were scattered reports from ordinary people who claimed encounters with strange craft and non-human beings. One of the more obscure and controversial of these accounts comes from a man named Harrison E. Bailey. Bailey's experience is said to have taken place in September of 1951, at a time when flying saucer reports were just beginning to capture national attention. According to later investigators, Bailey was traveling on foot through rural Midwestern terrain, moving between towns in the central United States. The exact location was never firmly established, partly because Bailey himself was reluctant to share precise details. As he walked along a quiet stretch of land, Bailey claimed he became aware of something unusual behind him. Turning around, he said he saw a metallic object resting in a nearby field. At first glance, it appeared bulky and angular, almost industrial in shape. But as he watched, the object seemed to change, becoming smoother, more rounded, and dome-like. Bailey later described the surface as silvery and reflective, catching the available light in a way that didn't resemble any aircraft he recognized. He said the object was completely silent. What happened next is where the account moves from strange to deeply unsettling. Bailey claimed that 2 figures became visible near what appeared to be a window or opening in the craft. They were humanoid in shape, roughly human-sized, and seemed to be observing him. He said they wore dark, transparent coverings over their faces, something like goggles or masks, and that their clothing appeared uniform and unfamiliar. According to Bailey, the being spoke to him in English, though he noted a slight accent that he couldn't identify. The exchange was brief and oddly calm. There were no threats, no dramatic gestures, just a short interaction that left Bailey confused rather than terrified. After this encounter, Bailey continued on his way. There was no chase, no sudden disappearance of the craft that he recalled at the time. He simply walked on, carrying the memory with him. For years, that might have been the end of the story. But Bailey later claimed that the encounter had lasting effects. He reported ongoing physical discomfort, fatigue, and episodes of paralysis that he believed were connected to the incident. At times, he referred to his condition as a kind of flying saucer disease, a phrase that reflects how little language existed at the time to describe experiences like his. As interest in UFOs grew through the 1960s and 1970s, Bailey began speaking more openly about what he believed had happened to him. He came to the attention of UFO researchers who documented his account as part of broader efforts to catalog close encounters. It was during this period that Bailey underwent hypnotic regression sessions, a common but controversial practice in UFO research at the time. Under hypnosis, Bailey recalled additional details that he claimed were hidden from his conscious memory. These later recollections included small, non-human beings surrounding him and a sense of being temporarily immobilized. He also described interior spaces within the craft and taller figures who communicated with him without speaking aloud. According to Bailey, these beings conveyed messages about peaceful intentions and humanity's future. He believed they wanted him to act as a kind of messenger, though he struggled to understand what that role might involve. These hypnosis-derived details significantly expanded the original story, but they also raised serious concerns among researchers and skeptics alike. Memories recovered under hypnosis are widely considered unreliable, and many investigators caution that such sessions can unintentionally shape or reinforce beliefs rather than uncover the objective truth. In later years, photographs attributed to Bailey began circulating within UFO publications. These images were said to show strange forms or faces connected to his experiences. However, they were met with skepticism even within the UFO community, with critics suggesting they could be photographic artifacts, misinterpretations, or deliberate fabrications. No independent analysis ever confirmed the images as extraordinary. As time passed, the Harrison Bailey case drifted further into the margins of UFO history. Unlike more famous encounters, it never received official investigation, radar confirmation, or multiple eyewitness support. It remained, at its core, a single-man story. And yet, it continues to be referenced in discussions of early contact claims. What makes Bailey's account noteworthy isn't its evidentiary strength, but its timing. His experience predates many of the themes that would later become standard in alien encounter narratives: humanoid beings, missing memories, paralysis, and messages of peaceful intent. Whether Bailey's story reflects a genuine encounter, a psychological experience, or a narrative shaped over time by cultural influences remains unknown. What is certain is that his account captures a moment in history when people were trying to make sense of the unknown with limited language, limited research tools, and no roadmap for understanding experiences that fell outside accepted reality. In the end, the Harrison E. Bailey case stands as a reminder of how easily mystery can take root when evidence is scarce, memories evolve, and answers never arrive. And perhaps that lingering uncertainty is why stories like this still endure. In the night sky over southern New South Wales, on a quiet evening in August 1954, Lieutenant J.A. O'Farrell prepared for a routine flight. As a seasoned pilot with the Royal Australian Navy, he was accustomed to navigating the darkness over Goulburn, guiding his Hawker Sea Fury back to the Naval Air Station at Nowra. The night was calm, with only the faint glow of distant towns breaking the black expanse. To most, it would be just another flight, but this night held something extraordinary, something that would later make headlines across Australia. About midway through his return, O'Farrell noticed two bright lights in the sky. At first, he assumed they were conventional aircraft, perhaps another naval flight returning from training. But as he adjusted his course to get a better view, it became clear that these lights were unlike any he had seen before. They moved independently, yet in coordination, maintaining a position on either side of his Sea Fury, almost as if observing him. The objects seemed to circle his plane, moving in a deliberate, measured pattern. O'Farrell, a pilot trained to remain calm under pressure, felt a mix of curiosity and caution. The lights were steady, not blinking or flashing as normal aircraft lights would, and they appeared solid in the night sky. He estimated their altitude to be roughly level with his own aircraft, around 13,000 feet, and their speed to be comparable to the Sea Fury's cruising pace of nearly 285 miles per hour. Yet even this did not capture the full strangeness of their movement. They accelerated with ease, changing positions smoothly, in ways no conventional aircraft could manage. Realizing the significance of what he was witnessing, O'Farrell contacted the radar operators at Nowra. As his voice relayed his position, the radar team began to track him, and what they observed would astonish everyone involved. two distinct radar echoes appeared alongside the Sea Fury, mirroring the object's positions and movements exactly as the pilot had described. For trained personnel accustomed to reading radar screens, the confirmation was undeniable. There were no other military aircraft in the vicinity, no scheduled exercises, and nothing that could account for the sudden appearance of two unidentified objects in the sky. The objects did not linger indefinitely. After circling his plane for several minutes, they suddenly accelerated, moving with incredible speed toward the northeast, and disappeared into the night. O'Farrell continued his flight back to Nowra, his instruments normal, the radar echoes gone, and the sky quiet once more. But the impression of the encounter remained vivid. Two lights, moving with apparent intelligence, capable of outmatching one of the fastest propeller-driven aircraft in service. When the incident was reported in newspapers that December, it created a sensation. Headlines proclaimed that flying saucers had been confirmed by radar, a claim that drew skepticism as well as fascination. For the naval authorities, the encounter warranted investigation. Official reports noted that Lieutenant O'Farrell was a reliable and experienced pilot, and the radar confirmation removed the possibility of optical illusion or misidentification. The combination of trained human observation and technological verification made this one of the most compelling UFO cases of the mid-20th century. For those who study aerial phenomena, the Nowra incident stands out not just for the objects themselves, but for the rare convergence of circumstances. A trained pilot, a capable aircraft, and radar confirmation together provide a level of credibility that is uncommon in sightings from this era. And yet, even with these records, the encounter remains unexplained. No craft on record could perform the maneuvers described. No aircraft in service could accelerate and vanish so quickly, leaving only the night sky behind. Decades later, the night over Goulburn retains its quiet mystery. Historians, researchers, and enthusiasts revisit the reports, examining the radar logs, the pilot's testimony, and the newspaper accounts. Each element tells the same story. A night flight interrupted by two lights moving with precision and intelligence, confirmed by instruments and human observation alike. Lieutenant O'Farrell's experience is a reminder that sometimes, even in the familiar skies above, there are moments that defy explanation, fleeting, astonishing, and undeniably real. As we reflect on the Nowra Sea Fury incident, we are left with more questions than answers. What were these objects? Where did they come from? And why did they choose to reveal themselves to a single pilot over southern New South Wales on a quiet night in 1954? Some mysteries remain unresolved, but the record is clear. For a few minutes, the sky held something extraordinary, something that even radar could not ignore. It was the morning of September 1st, 1974, in the quiet expanse of farmland north of Langenburg, Saskatchewan. The sun had just begun its climb, stretching long golden rays across the rippling canola fields. Mist hung lightly over the low sloughs scattered between the fields, and the air was still, almost expectant, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Edwin Furr, a 36-year-old local farmer, was tending to his swather, methodically moving across the crop rows, the familiar hum of machinery blending with the distant song of birds. It was a routine morning, one like any other, until something unusual caught his eye. At first, he thought it was just the reflection of sunlight off farm equipment left in the distance, but as he adjusted his focus, he realized the shapes were unmistakably distinct, hovering in the field itself. The first object he noticed was dome-shaped and metallic, spinning slowly, its surface catching the morning light in a way that made it almost shimmer. Edwin stopped the swather, dismounting to get a closer look. His heart raced, but curiosity pushed him forward. He approached cautiously, careful not to startle whatever it was that had appeared in his field. Within 15 feet, he could see the object's smooth, reflective surface and subtle movement. A faint mist or vapor seemed to emanate from underneath, though it had no sound, no smoke, nothing that resembled the machinery he knew so well. Then his eyes adjusted and he saw 4 more objects, all identical, arranged in a loose semicircle. They hovered silently, moving in perfect unison, each rotating slowly above the grass. Edwin describes the feeling that washed over him as a mix of awe, fear, and disbelief. He knew what he was seeing didn't belong to the ordinary world. For a few moments, he just watched, frozen, unable to turn away. The swather behind him refused to start, leaving him stranded at a distance from the machines that usually made him feel secure. Time seemed to stretch. He watched the objects for 15 minutes, observing their delicate balance, the way they almost glimmered in the morning light. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, they moved. Rising effortlessly into the sky, they left behind a grayish mist that lingered briefly over the crops before dissipating. Within moments, the objects were gone, absorbed into the clouds above, leaving no sound, no trace of propulsion, only the memory of what had just occurred. When the shock began to subside, Edwin's attention turned downward. Where the object had hovered, the rapeseed was pressed into perfect circular patterns, twisted clockwise, with the very centers of the circles standing upright. The patterns were intricate, as if etched carefully by some precise hand. This was physical evidence, a tangible reminder that the morning's events were real. Word of the sighting quickly reached the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, who came to investigate. They found no footprints, no signs of equipment being brought in, nothing that suggested a hoax. Edwin, known in the community as a responsible and honest farmer, was taken seriously. His testimony, combined with the crop marks left behind, made the case one of the most credible in Canadian UFO history. Researchers and journalists began to take notice. Newspaper articles described the incident, though some questioned how a man could be so certain without more witnesses. Yet those who knew Edwin vouched for his sincerity. For him, the experience was personal and unforgettable, a moment that changed the ordinary rhythm of his life in the fields. The Langenburg incident is remarkable for several reasons. The proximity of the witness allowed him to notice details almost no one else could: the shape, the spinning motion, the faint mist beneath each craft. The physical evidence, those precise swirls of flattened crops, adds weight to the report, giving it a rare quality in UFO investigations, something that can be measured, studied, and photographed. And the witness himself was entirely credible, a man whose life revolved around the hard, honest work of farming. Over the years, the incident remained largely unexplained. Some speculated about experimental aircraft, but there were no such tests reported in the area. Others suggested atmospheric phenomena, illusions of light, or psychological factors, but none could account for the physical traces and the multiple objects seen hovering simultaneously. The case remains a mystery, a singular event that defies conventional explanation. In 2024, 50 years later, the event received renewed recognition. The Royal Canadian Mint issued a commemorative coin depicting the hovering craft above the fields of Langenburg, acknowledging the incident's place in both UFO lore and Canadian cultural history. It was a reminder that even decades later, some moments remain unexplainable, hauntingly real, and impossible to forget. For those walking the fields north of Langenburg today, the rapeseed sways in the wind just as it always has. But on one morning in 1974, something extraordinary passed silently overhead, leaving behind not just mystery, but a story that would be told, retold, and commemorated, a story of wonder, of the unknown, and of the day the ordinary world of a Saskatchewan farmer was interrupted by the extraordinary. It's moments like these, brief, inexplicable, yet vivid in memory, that remind us how little we truly understand about the skies above, and how the quiet corners of our world can still hold unseen, astonishing events. It was an ordinary March evening in 1966, the kind of night that settles quietly over rural Michigan, where sound carries across open land and darkness feels heavier near water. Winter had not fully loosened its grip. Snow still clung to shaded ground, while thawing earth turned fields and swamps into slick, uneven terrain. The trees were bare, their branches etched sharply against the fading sky. In Dexter Township, just west of Ann Arbor, the night began like any other. No one expected history to take notice of that place. Shortly after nightfall, around 7:30 p.m., the first sign that something was wrong came not from the sky, but from the ground. At the Manor property, Frank Manor's dogs erupted into frantic barking, louder and more agitated than anything he had heard from them before. The sound carried across the fields, sharp and urgent, as though the animals sensed a threat they could not see. Frank stepped out to investigate. His 26-year-old son Ronald joined him. What they saw immediately silenced any thought of an ordinary disturbance. Beyond the edge of their property, hovering above the swamp, were strange lights, steady, luminous, and distinctly out of place. They were not moving like aircraft. They did not blink like navigation lights. They simply hung there, pulsing softly against the darkness. The Manors watched for several minutes, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. The lights did not drift away. They remained fixed, almost expectant. Curiosity overcame caution. Frank and Ronald grabbed flashlights and began moving toward the swamp, stepping carefully over uneven ground and frozen mud. The walk took nearly half an hour. Every sound, boots breaking crusted ice, water shifting beneath reeds, wind brushing through dead grass, seemed amplified in the quiet. As they drew closer, the source of the lights became clearer and far more unsettling. Hovering just above the swamp's edge was a solid object. Frank Manor later described it as roughly the size of a car, with a shape that suggested a pyramid or dome, wider at the base, narrowing upward. Its surface appeared metallic and textured, not smooth, almost corrugated or quilted. Lights of multiple colors, blue, red, white, and green, glowed from within or along its surface, shifting slowly in intensity. The object did not wobble or drift. It held its position with complete stability. At times, the lights dimmed as the men approached, then brightened again, as though reacting to their presence. Ronald later said that when they aimed their flashlights toward it, the glow seemed to change, not randomly, but in response. The experience left them with the disturbing impression that they were not simply observing something, but being observed in return. Then came the sound. A sharp, whistling noise cut through the swamp, brief, metallic, and sudden. Witnesses would later compare it to the sound of a bullet ricocheting off steel. It did not repeat continuously, but occurred in bursts, coinciding with slight movements of the object. At one point, the lights vanished entirely. For several seconds, the swamp was dark again. Then, without warning, the object reappeared hundreds of feet away, hovering just as steadily as before. No sound of acceleration. No visible path between positions, just absence and then presence. Back at the house, another witness had joined the growing list. Frank's son-in-law, Bob Wagner, watched the lights from a distance. From his vantage point, he saw the object rise suddenly, climbing hundreds of feet into the air, then stop, hover, and descend again. The movement was controlled and deliberate, nothing like a balloon or aircraft struggling against wind. Wagner later said there was a clear sense of purpose to the way the lights moved, as if guided by intention. By now, the disturbance had spread beyond the Manor family. Neighbors stepped outside. Calls were made. Word traveled quickly along rural roads. Before long, the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Department received reports of strange lights over the swamp. Deputies David Fitzpatrick and Stanley McFadden were dispatched to investigate. As their patrol car approached Quigley Road, both officers saw the lights immediately. They described a brilliant glow low over the swamp, bright enough to illuminate the surrounding area. As they drove closer, the light dimmed. When they slowed or stopped, it brightened again. This pattern repeated itself multiple times. The deputies exited their vehicle and watched. The object remained visible for more than 30 minutes, hovering, pulsing, occasionally shifting position. At one point, when lights from flashlights or vehicles appeared in the distance, the object streaked away at tremendous speed, only to return moments later. Other officers arrived. So did more civilians. A small crowd formed along the road, drawn by a mixture of fear and fascination. People whispered theories. Some stood silently, unsure what to say. A few attempted to signal the lights, raising flashlights into the darkness. None of the witnesses reported engine noise. No rotors, no exhaust, just light, motion, and silence. By the time the object finally departed for good, hours had passed. The swamp returned to darkness, but the sense of unease lingered. The following night, March 21st, the phenomenon appeared again, this time far from Dexter Township. At Hillsdale College, nearly 60 miles away, students were settling into their dormitories when a strange glow caught their attention. Around 10:30 p.m., lights were seen descending over the Slayton Arboretum, an open area of trees and low ground near the campus. One by one, students noticed the glow, then another, then several more. Within minutes, dozens of students gathered at windows or stepped outside into the cold night air. The object appeared football-shaped or oval, its surface indistinct but solid against the sky. Lights pulsed slowly in red, green, and white, sometimes bright enough to cast reflections across the ground and nearby buildings. Some students reported that the object descended into a hollow in the arboretum and remained there, partially obscured by trees. Others said the lights split apart, moved independently, then rejoined. There was no consensus on every detail, but there was no doubt among the witnesses that something unusual was present. Eventually, nearly 90 students were watching. Most stayed only a short time, unsettled and unsure what to make of it, but a few remained for hours. Among them was Barbara Gidget Cohn. She watched as the object faded, reappeared, and slowly moved away. Just before dawn, around 5:10 a.m., she saw a single light recede into the distance and vanish as the sky began to brighten. Police officers also responded to the Hillsdale sighting. They too observed the lights, silent, hovering, and unlike anything they could identify. Some witnesses later claimed that radio communication experienced interference during the event, adding another layer of strangeness to the night. By morning, Michigan was buzzing. Reports poured in from surrounding towns. Newspapers ran headlines about mystery lights and unidentified objects. Calls flooded police stations. What had begun as a rural disturbance was now a statewide phenomenon. The Air Force took notice. Project Blue Book, the military's official UFO investigation program, dispatched Dr. J. Allen Hynek, an astronomer from Northwest University, to investigate. Hynek arrived on March 23rd and spent several days interviewing witnesses, visiting the swamp near Dexter, and examining the arboretum at Hillsdale. Hynek's notes show careful attention to detail. He recorded descriptions of shape, color, movement, and duration. He spoke with law enforcement officers, students, and residents. He walked the terrain. At Hillsdale, Measurements indicated radiation levels above normal background, a fact noted but not emphasized publicly. Despite the number of credible witnesses, pressure mounted for an explanation. On March 25th, Hynek delivered his conclusion. The lights, he said, were most likely caused by swamp gas, methane igniting over marshland under specific atmospheric conditions. The reaction was immediate and fierce. Witnesses rejected the explanation outright. They insisted what they saw had structure, motion, and responsiveness, qualities no natural gas could account for. Law enforcement officers publicly disagreed. Students laughed bitterly. The media seized on the phrase, and swamp gas became a national punchline almost overnight. For Hynek himself, the case became a turning point. In later years, he would acknowledge that the explanation had been inadequate, shaped as much by institutional pressure as by evidence. The Michigan sightings helped push him toward advocating for serious scientific study of unidentified aerial phenomena. Decades have passed since those cold March nights. The swamps near Dexter remain quiet. The Arboretum at Hillsdale still fills with shadows at dusk, but the witnesses have never forgotten what they saw. Lights that hovered, pulsed, reacted, and moved with purpose. Even now, when the night settles over Michigan and the air grows still, the question remains: what truly hovered above those marshes and fields in 1966? And why did it choose to be seen? Thank you for listening and for spending this time exploring these encounters with me. If stories like these keep you watching, subscribing helps make sure this channel can continue creating new, deeper, and better content in the future. Every subscription, comment, and share helps these real experiences reach a wider audience. Until next time, stay curious and keep questioning what might be out there.